Hey guys, welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, could you start the show today by doing that? Just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit subscribe, go to YouTube, hit subscribe, and hit that bell so I can notify you every time we have a new interview, a new episode, a new video. We have lots of content going on over there. On rumble.com/Liz Wheeler, you can hit subscribe, and there's a little red button next to the subscribe button that allows you to join the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals, a VIP community with extended segments and lots of VIP content there as well. I appreciate everybody who's been subscribing. So for the show today, what I want to talk about, let's back up for a second. A bit back, we talked to a man named James Esses. He's a British man from the UK who was kicked out of grad school in the UK. He was studying to be a therapist. He'd completed 3 years of a 5-year program. He was just about finished, and all of a sudden he got the boot. The reason that he got kicked out was because he had founded an outside group, meaning not affiliated with his school, not on the school's campus. He had founded an outside group completely separately that was opposed to the so-called gender-affirming model of care when treating children who have gender disorders. Again, not on campus, not affiliated with a school, not an official therapist yet, but when the school found out that James Esses had founded this group, they gave him the boot. They did not warn him. There was no adjudication that happened. There was no recourse once he'd been kicked out. In fact, he received an email notifying him that he had been completely terminated from the school, and bam, that was it. He was gone with an email. So I asked him when I talked to him, okay, but what about all these other students in the program? Is everybody just okay with the radical gender theory, the queer theory that's being taught to these therapists in training? And he said, well, nobody speaks up because they're afraid of what happened to me, because the institutions that govern therapists have been captured. Not just the schools that are doing the training, but the licensing and the governing organizations have been captured by people whose goal is to indoctrinate young people with radical gender therapy. So even the students that don't fully buy into this, they just put their heads down, they keep quiet, and they participate in this. They're complicit because otherwise, what's their option? They don't get to pursue or practice the career that they want to. So James Estes' story, it's a lawsuit now. He's suing the school. He says it's not just the school, that there was a collusion aspect here with a governing board that's affiliated to the UK government, a trans activism group really, that he says was involved in bossing the school around and coercing them to fire him from this program. It is not just happening in the UK. It's horrifying to talk about it happening across the pond, but it is happening right here in the United States. There's another institution like this that has been captured in the United States. It's called the American School Counselors Association. You might think of your friendly guidance counselor at school when you were growing up. That no longer exists. School counselors today are indoctrinated agents of social change, actually, is what they call themselves. This is not some way that I am describing them. These counselors are in your children's school, and they're able to circumvent the laws that prohibit indoctrination, classroom instruction in radical gender theory. School counselors, they don't have a curricula. They don't fall under the purview of those laws. It's school counselors now that are being weaponized against your kids to indoctrinate them and to brainwash them into this neo-Marxist ideology. Agents of social change, that's what they call themselves. And their goal, I'm going to read you a couple of words here. This is from their official documentation, which we'll get to. Their goal is, quote unquote, anti-racism, anti-parental rights, DEI, and critical race theory. This whole smorgasbord of neo-Marxist ideology. So what I want to do tonight is I want to dive into the annual conference, the most recent annual conference from 2022 of the American School Counselor Association. I want to look at their PowerPoints. I want to look at their lectures. I want to show you video tonight so that you can see on the inside for yourself how this institution of school counselors, which is a burgeoning problem in children's schools, more and more counselors are being hired per capita, per child, to see exactly what these school counselors are doing to your children and how. So let's get to it. I like Upside, and I think you will too, because you may not know this about me, but I love doing photography. However, it can be a very expensive hobby, especially with price hikes lately. That's why I have to tell you about my new favorite way to save money. It's an app called Upside. It's an incredible app, actually, for anyone who is impacted by inflation. So that means anybody who's filling up their gas tank or buying groceries. With Upside, I get cash back on every purchase that I make, and I can use it to fund, all the pictures that I print to put in photo albums. It's basically cash back for just doing what you would do anyway. And the app, by the way, is super easy to use. To get started, you just download the free Upside app, use my promo code Liz5, and you can get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Next, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, then pay as usual with a credit or debit card, follow the steps in the app, and voila, you get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back on Upside. Upside users are earning hundreds of dollars a year. So download the free Upside app and use promo code Liz5 to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. That's an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using promo code Liz5. But first, download the free Upside app. All right, with me now is a man who's created an organization dedicated to parents, for parents, not only to expose the reality of the corruption that is underpinning the American School Counselor Association, but also giving parents a guide for what they can do to protect their children, because not everyone has the capacity or the ability to homeschool. Some people don't have a choice, and nonetheless, they want to protect their children. So Alvin, thanks for joining me.
I am so happy to be here, Liz. Thank you for having me. Big fan of your show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm really excited about this conversation today because the topic itself is kind of dark. It's heavy to think of this stuff being aimed at our children. Before we get to your toolkit for how parents can fight back on this, I'd like to talk with you about some of the things that you've uncovered as it relates to the American School Counselor Association. And my first question for you is, what caused you to suspect, or what brought you to the realization that the ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, was no longer your friendly guidance counselor that a lot of us might remember from our younger school years?
Sure. Well, a lot of it, we started noticing that it's coming through mental health. We noticed that a lot of things that parents, or almost everything that parents are fighting, is smuggled in through the idea of mental health. That was kind of our first clue. And so when we started digging into it more, we realized that it's coming through the school counselors. And now up till the last summer, most focus was on teachers, school board members, and that type of thing, which is true. 100% they deserve the heat that they're getting. But largely the teacher only affects the culture of a classroom, generally speaking. So we were really wondering, how is it that the culture of an entire school is being impacted? And even school board members, they might sign contracts and waste a lot of money and bring in a lot of social emotional learning, a lot of the data mining, which we can talk about. But a school board member doesn't affect that particular middle school. And so that's what we started kind of pulling on the thread and finding. And like what you said perfectly is the American School Counselor Association, or we call ASCA, ASCA. And they are the largest school counseling mental health for all school counselors. They have a chapter in all 50 states. They control all the trainings, all the objectives, all the missions of all the school counselors and social workers in all K through 12. And now they don't have to join, but it's one of those things where if you don't join, then there's the doxing and the bullying that you've covered a lot and that we've heard about. So, but here's the problem, Liz. When you're trying to convince a large body of people that something that they know it's true, like you said, they're just nice guidance counselors helping you with college prep courses, are no longer true, you can't tell them. You have to show them. So what we did in July 2022, we went to the ASCA annual conference. It was in Austin, Texas. And we grabbed as many videos as we can. We got their PowerPoints, their trainings. And then after that, we went to their webinars, went through their certifications, and grabbed all that and created a campaign called Behind Closed Doors. And people can find it on courageasahabit.org under school counselors. And we basically showed them in their own natural habitat, their own videos, their own openings. We're not pulling together different things. We're just showing them in their own habitat. And they are the biggest purveyor of the transgender cult. They push critical race theory, and they've been doing it in plain sight because parents are not looking at them. And we wanted parents to understand that not only have they been completely hijacked, but they also, Liz, have access to the most vulnerable children. That's really the heartbreaking part.
It's super heartbreaking. It's also really sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have laws like the Parental Rights and Education Law in Florida, which prohibits classroom instruction about this kind of stuff. But does school counseling, does that fall under the purview of such a law, or is that separate from the official definition of curriculum? It seems to me that this would be a way for ideologues, especially those who are proponents of queer theory, to sneak this in when they're otherwise not allowed.
100%. It is completely outside the curriculum. In fact, here's how they're doing it. And for your listeners, if this is the first time you've heard of ASCA, here's their basic strategy. What they're doing is they're redefining two words, two terms. That's it. It's safe and abuse. Okay, safe and abuse. And up till this point, everybody that's listening, every normal person knows what it means when a child is unsafe. We're talking about physical abuse, neglect, things of that nature. But what these school counselors and social workers are doing is that they're redefining the word safe and abuse. It's no longer what we think. What they mean is if you're a parent and you're not succumbing to the transgender delusion, you're not calling them by the right pronoun, you're not giving them those breast binders, you're not allowing them to change their name. Now you, the parents, are unsafe. Your home is abusive and the school is the safe place. And that's why they're laying the foundation for the separation of parents and children. Now you've seen it in Maine. There was a social worker who transitioned a 13-year-old without telling her mother. You have a lawsuit in Wisconsin, same situation by a school counselor, and on in every state, whether it's red or blue. That's the strategy, because if you redefine words, you don't have to change the laws. And what they're doing is that they're taking advantage of very good laws that's been on the books for decades. So when they say, well, what about the kids that are being abused? We have laws for that. Thank God we do. But they're taking advantage of that law by expanding those terms. And now they treat parents who burn their children with a cigarette the same as if they don't call Janie Joe. And that's what they're doing through the safety and inclusion and the kindness and the anti-bullying, things that none of us would ever disagree with. They're doing language contamination and they're smuggling in the transgender ideology, which separates the children from their families.
I want to tell you why I like 4Patriots and why I think you will too, because a food shortage could be coming even here to the United States. This is what experts were writing as recently as July. Drought, inflation, and even new political policies are pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. We can all see this happening right before our eyes. It's why survival food is more important than ever. I encourage you to create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4Patriots survival food kits. This is not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years, super survival food. It's hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the US. It gives jobs to over 200 Americans. And the kits themselves are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, and they stack easily for easy storage. They have different breakfasts, lunches, dinners. And by the way, you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. It's very easy. You just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use code Liz to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store. Just go to 4patriots.com and use code Liz to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com, code Liz, to start building your own stockpile today. 4patriots.com, code Liz. It's like exponential sneaking. Not only are they trying to sneak in the ideology into classrooms, but not through official classroom instruction, they're also trying to sneak in definitions or redefinitions of words outside of the law so that the law means something different. I want to show a couple of things that you collected when you were at this conference this past summer. Right. First of all, I want to show on the screen a slide that says what the agenda of the conference is. This is bullet points. I'm going to read it for anybody who's listening to the show and not watching. I want to read this. So the conference itself is called No Limits, or this is what the slide is. No Limits, the ASCA 2022 Annual Conference. This is the agenda. Anti-racism starts with us. Become an LGBTQ inclusive school. Legal and ethical considerations. Student surveys. Equity in action through systemic change. Each of these things is a bullet point. Teach grad students trauma-informed practices. Support transgender and gender-expansive students. School counselors' legal literacy and ethical practice. DEI Town Hall 2022, Anti-Racism Perspectives, Middle School Matters, and Build Repair Relationships with Restorative Justice, and LGBTQ plus School Counselors Affinity Group. I mean, Alvin, it's like a who's who or a what's what conference presentation of all of the neo-Marxist ideologies out there.
If I showed anybody that agenda, now keep in mind, this was a 3-day conference. This was just a fraction of their agenda. This was it, but all 3 days were like this. If I showed this agenda to anybody and said, what do you think this came from? Not a single person, not a single American would say, oh, that must be from a bunch of school counselors in K through 12. It looks like a conference for left-wing ideology.
It looks like something you would find out of the Frankfurt School, to be honest. Right. So this is something interesting that you had on your website. I think I neglected to mention the name of your website. It's courageisahabit.org. Highly recommend that everyone check it out. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. And talk about the toolkits that you have for parents, how to fight back against this. Right. But you mentioned on your website that the ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, shifted their mission in 2014. They used to be an ostensibly politically neutral, actually value neutral organization, at least that's what they claimed to be, and they shifted that in 2014. Talk to me about this shift. What was behind this? Who was behind this? And what is their actual admitted mission now?
So you're right. So ASCA up to this point was exactly what you said earlier. They were just these really wonderful guidance counselors that helped you with your academics, or if you had a hard time, they may talk to you. But if there's anything serious, they would bring your parents in and really try to help, maybe help recommend a family therapist. But they wouldn't get involved into your personal life. So in 2014, under the Michelle Obama's Reach for the Stars initiative, the Obama administration changed the way the school counselors, their missions. And so on Behind Closed Doors 1, because we have 4 parts there, we actually put at the end a mission statement from 1988. I think 1988 or 1998. And we compared it to the one in 2020 or 2021, and it's completely different. The one from the first one basically says their mission statement was, you do not pass your values on to the students that you're treating, which is exactly what it should be, which is exactly what most parents still think it is. Then the recent one is basically, you are an activist. You have to push your ideology. This is your mission. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And you can see the difference completely between the two. And so since the Obama administration made that change, they knew that if you could fundamentally change the mental health, you can then get to the kids, because nobody would fight you on mental health. The moment you say this grant for mental health, it's a blank check. And right now, the Biden administration is doing these huge grants for mental health. And they're getting away with that by stating that there is evidence-based research shows, or is data-driven. Those 3 terms: data-driven, research shows, or evidence-based. And the reason why they're getting this data is from the data mining that they're taking from your children in class. And they're called social emotional learning surveys, or these health surveys given by the state. Social emotional learnings is a private company, a lot of money, your tax dollars. And then they're also doing the surveys from the state. Most parents believe that these questions, if I can just see the questions, they're innocuous, whatever. It's not the questions, even though there's some real heavy sexual questions there for children. It's how they interpret the data, Liz. So I'll give you an example. One of the questions, social emotional learning questions, is, how confident are you that you can complete the work that's assigned to you in school? In any other time, that's a fairly good question, because you want to measure how they feel about their work. Is it the teacher not maybe teaching it right? Or there's a lot of different things. Is it the home? They're not doing, the homework. The parents are not involved. It's a good measure. Today, if you answer, I don't feel confident doing my work, or it's too much work, which of course, what child wouldn't answer that? They now say the school culture is oppressive. The school culture is not representative or inclusive of students. And the recommendation would be to include more flags, more GSA clubs or the Gay Sexual Alliance clubs, more pornography, more different groups coming in, more political ideology, more transgender ideology, because students don't feel inclusive, welcome, seen, insert your nonsense virtual signaling. And that's why they cannot study. That's why. And so now you and I both know that if a school says, oh, okay, research shows we're going to put more of this stuff in, all that does is, of course, sucks away time and attention because from academics, because you're making them victims. Then the next year, when their academics is even more lower, now they take that survey again and they come back and say, oh, academics are even worse because the school still not inclusive. So it's just this self-fulfilling prophecy of this data. And we'll talk about what the parents can do about that. But that's what the Biden administration are using. They're using that data and they're pumping in hundreds and hundreds of millions for mental health. And now these schools have to create these programs, have to hire more social workers and school counselors. It's happening in all 50 states. And that's what they're doing. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy of collect the data, mine the data, interpret it how we want, and then infuse the school with more of these ASCA school counselors and social workers.
That's so insane that they would take a question like, do you feel that you have too much homework to a child? Every child's going to answer yes to that, by the way, as they should.
As they should, right.
And they're going to infer that if a child thinks that they have too much homework, that means that they're not given the resources, and those terms have too positive of a connotation, but they're not steeped in ideology of some other kind of identity-driven club. I mean, to call that methodologically corrupt is like the tamest phrase that I can think of. It's almost as if they think that we as parents are too dumb to even look into this, that they would try to propagate this on the scale that they are. I'm sure every parent listening to the show has seen those health surveys. You've seen the social emotional learning questions that are asked your students. You might look at it and think, okay, I don't know what the big deal is. These are fairly innocuous questions, whatever. Right. But this is what's behind all of them?
Yes. And so right now, the health surveys between January 3rd and June 30th, all 50 states at different times are doing these health surveys. The health surveys, you can opt out because it's given by the state. But of course, they don't make it easy. And if you go to courageasahabit.org, we have a little button there that says 2023 health survey, and we walk you through what to do and what to ask. So you can get out of those. The social emotional learning surveys are a lot harder because it's from a private company like Panorama. And those companies don't make it easy for you to see the questions. You actually don't see the questions at all. And they make it very difficult for you to opt out. There's no path to opt out. You have to force that. You can force it, but it's difficult. And we walk you through that under SEL data or SEL surveys. And so, but in these questions, so one of the things I want parents to stop asking is, let me see the questions. It doesn't matter what the questions are. It doesn't matter. It's how they interpret the data. And they interpret it through the lens of a critical race theorist. Or if you want to say it, they interpret through a lens of somebody who is very steeped in left-wing ideology. And so that's all you need to understand, that is through the lens of who interprets that data. It could be something as simple as how many, and this is an actual question, by the way, it's an actual health question for the middle schools. How many days a week do you have dinner with your family? So, okay, someone might answer 4 times a week. That child's probably not that vulnerable because it sounds like they have adult supervision, parents are involved. A child answers 1 day a week. That child, for that counselor, will know they're more vulnerable. Now, that child is a little bit easier to move to the transgender cult because obviously they probably don't have, right? Now, it doesn't mean that. It could mean they just have a lot of sports and their parents are just shuttling them back and forth. So obviously it's not 100%, but these kind of real personal things, asking about firearms, asking about sex, asking about all these things, no government entity should be data mining your child. I don't care what your belief is. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever your belief is. I hope we can all agree, no government entity should be data mining your child and the child's values and your family's values. And what they're doing with this data is it's insane. It's corrupt and it's on purpose. They spend a lot of taxpayer dollars to do that. And so when parents fight things like genderqueer in schools and this book is gay or the bathrooms and all those things, you're fighting kind of at the end there. The reason why they're able to push the policy is because they're using this data to justify it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So parents, if you really want to throw a wrench, get your kids out of the data. If you get them out of the data, that helps a lot. That's not the only thing. I'm not saying that's the magic bullet. There's no magic bullet to this indoctrination in school, this problem, but that is a big one, is to get them out of that data mining.
I like stamps.com because postage rates just increased again. Luckily, stamps.com has the best discounts in the industry with rates you literally cannot find anywhere else, like up to 88% off USPS and UPS. Get access to the shipping services you need right from your computer. Anytime, day or night, no lines, no traffic, no waiting, no bureaucracy. All you need is a computer and a printer. Stamps.com lets you print your own postage and shipping labels right from your home or from your office. It's ready to go in minutes. They even send you a free scale so you'll have everything you need to get started. Set your business up for success when you get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code Liz for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code Liz. That's Stamps.com, click that microphone at the top of the page, and enter code Liz. Stamps.com, code Liz. I'll tell you what, Alvin, what you're describing reminds me of exactly what the Chinese communists do in their algorithm on TikTok.
Yes.
They mine all this data, all these keystrokes of children, not because they care about the physical data, not because it's necessarily a problem for an app theoretically to see what other apps you have on your phone, but because they're trying to identify children who are vulnerable. They're trying to identify children who can be manipulated so that they can serve them content to manipulate them. It's the exact same thing served in a different way. And by the way, you got video from this conference, from the ASCA 2022 annual conference, and I want to show a clip here because they admit at this conference that they are master manipulators, that school counselors should be master manipulators. Take a look at this.
That circle that we mentioned earlier, anti-racism starts with us. Dr. Damian Sweeney, one of the authors, is here. So with that, it really looks at how are we what are we doing to take care of ourselves in this process? Because it's exhausting and it's draining, right? Raise your hands. Resistance. Changing systems work is draining and it takes time and energy. So what are we doing to team with other people in that process to keep our energy up? How are we being aware of ourselves? And then how are we able, this whole concept of working smarter, not harder, that politics. Like I love work by Dr. Rebecca Pianta, Dr. Caroline Lopez Perry. They are brilliant. They're out of California. They are brilliant talking about politics. How can we influence the system? So politics, being savvy, like how are decisions made, who makes decisions, and how to navigate that system. Dr. Natalie Edelman-Asinga says school counselors are the best master manipulators. And the best way, right? How do we look at systems and how can we maneuver them and change them? And that helps with our work with resistance.
It's not just the phrase master manipulators that gets me, Alvin. It's the fact that she identifies what they're trying to manipulate, that they look at systems and institutions, they want to change them, and they will manipulate students in the name of mental health to do so.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I think what people wonder is like, what is the goal, right? A lot of parents go, what is the goal? So let's take something like responsible decision-making. They always say social emotional learning is all about managing emotions and so things like responsible decision-making. So I want parents to remember this. Everything they say in school today is what we call language contamination. Okay, it's language contamination. When they tell you all we're doing is just ABC, your first thought, I want you to get rid of the knee-jerk reaction, is saying my first thought is, oh, I do that at home too. Stop that. Your first thought should be, whose lens is it through? I will give you an example on responsible decision-making. You and I, obviously, if you have kids, responsible decision-making, we pretty much agree on what it is, right? Depending on the age of the child. What they mean, and I'm going to take a book out of an episode that you did, Liz, recently about California doing the wealth tax, okay? For them, responsible decision-making means if you're white or you're successful, when you get older, you are responsible for voting for things like reparations. You're responsible for taxing the rich. You're responsible for making sure that people who have too much give to people who are oppressed. It's that oppress and oppressor model. In one of the videos in ASCA, she talks literally about that. So when the video that you did was really fantastic about California, doing the wealth tax and taxing people who have 50 million or over, even when they leave, That didn't come because somebody just wrote an executive order. That came because California has already brainwashed 2 generations of kids. Now they're voting age. They're voting for this stuff. They're voting for this stuff. And now it's spreading to the rest of the country. So when we say things like empathy, it's not what you and I talk about, Liz. It's not. What they mean is that if you're a girl from a very early age, they will teach you. If a man walks into a restroom or locker room and you have that reaction that a woman should, you need to have empathy. You need to have empathy because you have unconscious bias or whatever it is that they're teaching the kids. So I want parents to remember, when they tell you we're just doing this, the question I want you to answer immediately is, through whose lens is it? Because the thing is, traits are not good or bad. Okay, we assign certain things like goal setting. Goal setting is good, right? We always have short-term goals, long-term goals. But think about it. If we capture these like if you capture like a serial killer, we don't say, oh, he was really great at goal setting, but he did. I mean, sometimes he actually exceeds his goal, which is horrible, but he had a goal. He met it. Sometimes he has to come back a few times because it's, so he has grit and determination. We don't say that about serial killers, right? Of course not, because we're good people. So I want parents to remember, skills are not good or bad. It depends on who's teaching and whose lens is it teaching it and through whose lens. And today in K through 12, not to say that there's not good teachers, not to say there's not good counselors, but the system itself are using the things that you formerly believe is good, and they're weaponizing your kindness against you by making you assume that when they say things like responsible decision-making, empathy, that it means the same thing. It doesn't mean the same thing that you mean. It means the same thing through the lens of someone who believes that America is oppressive.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. It's because it goes a step beyond just redefining a word. Mm-hmm. It's actually, a lot of characteristics are value neutral. They don't have morality inherent to them until we culturally assign them morality. And up until now, our culture has assigned a lot of these things like determination and grit and achieving a goal as positive things in a positive connotation. But these people are taking that away and redefining the morality behind it. That's really scary. And by the way, this is something parents should also see. This is another video from the conference where the ethics chairman, who is also the past president of the ASCA, her name is Carolyn Stone. Right. This is what she thinks of you as the parent and your parental rights. Take a look at this.
Our kids are being erased by laws such as Parents' Bill of Rights and the Stop Woke Act. There's actually a Stop Woke Act. You refuse to remain comfortable in your role as long as there's one student left out of the success equation. Yes, learn the rules so that you know how to break them.
Parental rights erase children, Alvin?
Yes.
There's no way to misinterpret that.
No, and we actually have another video of her saying to, again, now remember, this isn't her talk in her living room, right? This is during an annual conference to all the counselors from all across the country, all 50 states. She's saying that we have to be careful how we behave. Okay, we have to be careful how we behave because there's certain things we can do in New York that we can't do in Florida. Remember how before, when Florida passed that parental rights bill and everybody was saying it's not necessary, not necessary? She's saying that if you have, remember earlier in that clip, she says you have to learn the rules to break them. And she repeated that again in this other clip. And she says you have to learn the rules so you can break them. You have to know what state you live in and what you can and can't get away with. And she literally said, ethics are situational. Now, this is the head of the ethics committee for 20 years for ASCA, school counselors, people who are around your children and around children who need help sometimes. She's saying ethics are situational. And I can pop that video over in post if you like, but if I played if I said, it is.
It's beyond moral relativism.
Yeah. If I told this story without video, nobody will believe me. They'll think I'm making it up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's incredible the work that you're doing because you, well, as the kids say, you're providing receipts here. Talk to me. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how they do this, though. So you have a part on your website, a whole tab on a program. The acronym is RAMP.
Okay.
this program, you say, is a model. It stands for Recognized ASCA Model Program. And the more acronyms, by the way, that these organizations use, the more skeptical I become of them because they're trying to hide from us what these words mean.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me about the Trojan horse that this program is, this RAMP program.
Okay. So the lady that you played earlier, when she says we're master manipulators, her name is Emily Goodman Scott, and she's one of the biggest trainers for ASCA. And she has spent 10 years in Virginia, mostly in Loudoun County. So we all know, if you're following, how awful Loudoun County is. Well, here's why. Loudoun County has the most RAMP schools, okay? R-A-M-P. RAMP basically is a model that ASCA puts out. And it's kind of like a stamp of approval. If you have certain amount of things, and every year they kind of change it, but the more woke ideology, the more programs, the more GSA clubs, the more this policy, the more transgender ideology, the more Black Lives Matter, the more you have of these things, the closer you get to this RAMP approval, okay? And so what that simply means is that they take, and then the nitty gritty of this is, they take something called the MTSS, okay? And that's a multi-tier system of support, MTSS. The MTSS is very old. It's 3 layers, it's 1, 2, and 3. And it used to be used on an individual basis. So if you're a child that maybe is kind of neglected, you don't have a parent home to help you do your homework, you don't have internet connection, maybe you come to school a little bit unclean, they may put you on the first level because it's like, you know what, there's some red flags here, right? But by and large, you're not being abused or anything like that. You're just kind of neglected. And so, so there might be some other reasons why they put you on the first level, but the idea is to get you out of that first level. So there's interventions for that. But obviously, if they find that there's some actual abuse, they're going to move you to the second level. And of course, we don't want kids in that third level because that's really, really, really terrible abuse. And so that's the MTSS. Okay, and it's great, right? Because you need to be able to categorize kids who really need help on an individual basis. That's the key word, individual. RAMP and the ASCA model completely redefines and hijacks the MTSS, and they put every child in the first layer. The moment your child walks in that school, they're in that first layer. Okay, so what's the abuse? Why would you put them in the first layer? You read it earlier in the agenda. You remember when you read the agenda from the ASCA conference? And one of them was looking at trauma base. They say now that every child needs to be in the first level because every child has trauma. If you're white, you have trauma because you have unbiased racism and you don't know it. You have white privilege, white supremacy. If you're not white, obviously you're traumatized because of white America, right? America is oppressive. So now they start with the premise that all children are traumatized, and they're traumatized because of their home. Their parents don't know any better to teach them. Their parents don't know how to teach them. We know how to teach them. And then they just move you up from there. So RAMP basically uses the MTSS and says, all children are this way. And now we need more school counselors and social workers to treat each student. And so now they spend one-on-one time with every student. And then, of course, it's not hard to find the students that are maybe just having a bad day or having a bad week. And instead of helping them with that, it's, hey, maybe you're not the right gender. Maybe that's really your problem. Now, I'm simplifying it a little bit because obviously the process is not going to take a day, but it's going to take, they're in school all 7-8 hours a day. And that's the brainwashing, the 12-year brainwashing program. So sometimes when a parent goes, oh, you know what, I saw what they're doing, social emotional learning, they're second grade. It doesn't seem so bad. Yeah, because that's the first wave of the brainwashing. Then parents, I hear this every day, all week long. Everything seemed fine, but then when they're 11, she came to me and said, I think I'm a boy. Or he came to me and said, I think I'm a girl, call me by this name. It just happened all of a sudden. No, it didn't happen all of a sudden. It happened starting in that first grade when you said, oh, it didn't seem so bad. And that's the deviousness of it. They're not going to come in and say, hey, this is what we're doing to your children. They're just saying, we're going to help them feel inclusive. We're going to help them manage their emotions. And again, through whose lens? And unfortunately today, it's through the lens of critical race theorists, it's through the lens of the transgender cult recruiters. And this is why all these parents are going, what is going on? Why is this happening? How is this happening? Well, it's happening because they're data mining your child, using that as an excuse to bring in these programs, and then couching it behind the guise of mental health.
It's so evil. I sit here, my daughter's only 2 years old. She's not in school yet. And
Right.
I can feel my blood pressure rising on behalf of all of the children
Yeah.
who are being targeted by this in public schools and all the parents who don't know about this. I mean, this is I can't think of another word. It's such an evil tactic to wage against our children, not only to be sneaky and try to circumvent and sidestep laws that prohibit official classroom instruction, curricula that indoctrinates children in radical gender theory, to use school counselors as a way to dodge that, but then to label every child as needing intervention, not just children who actually need intervention, to automatically say, well, we have to funnel you into our system because we want to be agents of social change. We want to resist these institutions. We want to change the whole landscape. And so we have to access every children. So we'll funnel you. It's unreal, except it's very real. It's very tangible. It's right in front of us. Alvin, on your website, for all of the parents who are listening to this, you have a toolkit of things parents can do to enact change in their communities and to protect their children on an individual basis. I'm going to direct people to your website. It's courageisahabit.org. But can you give people a little idea of some of the things that they can do so they don't feel so helpless?
Absolutely. So I would say there's 3 things to make it as simple as possible. Obviously, we have a lot more than that, but here's the 3 things. If you go to courageisahabit.org, the first thing I want you to do is get your children out of the data mining. So there's the SEL survey. Any of the items in there, we explain. It's basically everything I explained, but more detail. We break it down for you. It's not hard to read. It's meant for the average parent. And then at the end of that, there's the opt-out forms for you to use. And then we also tell you what happens. We give you a suggestion what happens if the school lies to you and say you can't opt out. So that's the one thing. And then there's the 2023 health survey that's going on right now. Opt your kids out of that too. The second thing is I like every parent to go down to courageisahabit.org and go to school counselors. And any of the items in there, it's just exposing ASCA. But at the end of each item, no matter which one you click on, there is an opt-out form for you to say, I forbid my child to have formal or informal meetings with a school counselor or social worker without my presence. Now, some schools may not honor that, but at least you have that in there officially. And now there's some leeway that you can press on. But you have to start with something. You have to start with something where this is my official request. And when they fight back on you, now you've got to fight, right? But some schools will honor it, some schools won't. Depends on which district you are. But that's for sure. Make sure you opt your kids out of any mental health. And I want to just say one thing for parents. Like, look, we all know that if you're sending your kid to something as simple as gymnastics class or getting a dentist or an eye doctor, what do you parents do? You research. You ask for referrals. I mean, you have a 2-year-old. How many referrals are you getting from your mom friends that have older kids on everything? You're sending these kids to these schools. You have no idea. You didn't vet these school counselors. You didn't get a referral. You didn't get to see their credentials and their reviews or anything like that. So why are they mentally treating your child, talking about things like sex and family life and all these different things, right? So get your kids out of that. I don't care how nice a school counselor is. It doesn't matter. If you feel like your child needs help, you go and you bring them to a counselor of your choice. And then the third and the last thing is under school counselors, we have an item called stranger danger. When we have little kids and when they become of a certain age, you teach them, hey, if somebody walks up to you and they have a puppy or a candy, don't do that. Make sure you go back to mom and dad. If you're in a department store and they grab you, scream your head off and all these different things, right? We hope it never happens, but we tell them that anyway, right? Because we know the realities of life. But somewhere along the way, parents stop doing that. They stop telling their kids how to defend themselves in school. So stranger danger is our way of reminding parents that, hey, this is still your children. Okay? This is still your children. And we give 5 strategies that every family can modify based on their values and then, of course, the age of the child. But it starts the conversation of how do you get your children to at least have some defense, just like you would when they were 5 or 6, when you're asking them, hey, if someone comes up to you, it's the same thing. So that still works. And we give some strategies on that. And those are the 3 things. And I will say, and I'm going to put this out there because I put this out there every time I have one of these interviews, if I have time, some of your detractors and opponents will say everything he says is lies, is misinformation. They won't tell me where, but they'll say that. So I'm going to put this out there for anybody listening saying that he's lying, is fear-mongering, is misinformation. I invite anybody to get on a live stream with me, okay? Any live stream, you pick the day. You can even pick the host if you want. I'll get on. The only thing I ask is two things. Number one, I require 90 minutes. Number two, I have to be able to share my screen, okay? The reason why I require 90 minutes is because any of my detractors, when they say it's lies and misinformation, for example, if they say social emotional learning is good, it's only good in sound bites. If you give me 90 minutes, I will take you to deep waters and I'll bury anybody that says that these things that we're saying are lies.
And sadly, those types of requests or those types of demands are necessary in this day and age because they're the defenders are smart, they're savvy, they're sneaky. I mean, we just talked about these facts. Be my guest, people, and try to refute them. I wish they weren't true. Let's make them untrue again. Let's get this out of our schools. Let's protect our children. You can go, if you're a parent or a grandparent, or you have a niece or a nephew or a close friend who has children, go to courageisahabit.org. See all of this for yourself. We touched barely a drop of all of the information that you have. We barely scratched the surface here, and there's also toolkits for what you can do. Alvin, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. And I'll see everybody on social media. We're a nonprofit and a tiny team. So any support you give us, I assure you, goes right back to creating these tools for you. And we just want to encourage everybody, stay on offense and make courage a habit in your home.
And there you have it. Just when we think that we have the Marxists figured out and their tactics and strategies identified, they shift and change and morph and sneak around us and sidestep our laws to try to get to our children. Thank goodness for organizations like courageisahabit.org that has exposed this. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.